The Supreme Court is just weeks away from ruling on major cases related to whether Trump can be prosecuted for his efforts to stay in office after losing the 2020 election and whether January 6th rioters can be charged with obstruction. Last week, after news broke about Justice Samuel Alito having flown flags associated with the January 6th Stop the Steal movement over two of his homes, alarmed lawmakers in Congress sent a letter to Chief Justice John Roberts demanding a meeting to explain what is happening. And now, in a highly unusual move, Justice Alito has responded directly to lawmakers in a letter of his own. And you won't believe what he said. I've got my hands on the letter and I'll read it to you word for word. And make sure you watch all the way until the end, because the way he finishes this letter is just outrageous. This guy is a real piece of work. This all stems from a story that broke this month about an upside-down American flag flown at Justice Alito's primary residence weeks after the 2020 election. And then it was revealed that a second flag associated with the Stop the Steal movement was seen flying over his summer home in New Jersey just last year. Justice Alito responded to the stories and said his wife was responsible for hanging the flags. But now, in a rare move, Justice Alito has directly responded to lawmakers in a letter, and he's got a lot to say. In the letter, a defiant Justice Alito is refusing to recuse himself from any cases related to the 2020 election or January 6th. We already know he threw his wife under the bus and pinned the blame on her, but wait until you hear the details of what happened according to Justice Alito. The explanation he gives for why the flags were flown and why they didn't come down when he was made aware of them is just ridiculous. Let's read the letter and you judge for yourself. Dear Senators Durbin and Whitehouse, this is in response to your letter of May 23rd to the Chief Justice requesting that he take steps to ensure that I recuse in Trump v. United States and any other cases related to the 2020 presidential election or the January 6th attack on the Capitol. As the court has pointed out, individual justices, rather than the court, decide recusal issues. I am therefore responding directly to your letter. In it, you claim that two incidents involving the flying of flags created an appearance of impropriety that requires my recusal. The applicable provision of our Code of Conduct states as follows. A justice is presumed impartial and has an obligation to sit unless disqualified. A justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. That is, where an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties. And that's from their Code of Conduct in the Supreme Court. The two incidents you cite do not meet the conditions for recusal set out in the Code of Conduct, and I therefore have an obligation to sit under the Code of Conduct. So, Justice Alito is pointing to the Code of Conduct that the Supreme Court recently came up with and says that these rules prove I don't have to recuse myself from this case. And this is exactly why having a Code of Conduct created by the Supreme Court to govern themselves has no teeth and is a total joke. Justice Alito continues. The first incident cited in your letter concerns the flying of an upside-down American flag outside the house in Virginia where my wife and I reside. In considering whether this event requires recusal, an unbiased and reasonable person would take into account the following facts. As I have stated publicly, I had nothing whatsoever to do with flying of that flag. I was not even aware of the upside-down flag until it was called to my attention. As soon as I saw it, I asked my wife to take it down, but for several days she refused. My wife and I own our Virginia home jointly. She therefore has the legal right to use the property as she sees fit, and there were no additional steps that I could have taken to have the flag taken down more promptly. Where do I even begin with this one? Is a marriage not a partnership? Shouldn't your spouse be on the same page as you? I find it hard to believe that Justice Alito's wife would refuse to take down a flag after he told her that it is problematic and could interfere with his ability to do his job. And these aren't ordinary problems at the office. This is the ability of a Supreme Court justice to appear impartial and rule on major cases that impact the lives of every single American. Justice Alito is acting like his wife is his roommate and they live entirely separate lives. My wife's reasons for flying the flag are not relevant for present purposes, but I note that she was greatly distressed at the time due, in large part, to a very nasty neighborhood dispute in which I had no involvement. A house on the street displayed a sign attacking her personally, and a man who was living in the house at the time trailed her all the way down the street and berated her in my presence using foul language, including what I regard as the vilest epithet that can be addressed to a woman. My wife is a private citizen, and she possesses the same First Amendment rights as every other American. She makes her own decisions, and I have always respected her right to do so. She has made many sacrifices to accommodate my service on the Supreme Court, including the insult of having to endure numerous, loud, obscene, and personally insulting protests in front of our home that continue to this day and now threaten to escalate. Look, I'm sorry Justice Alito's wife is being bothered by protesters, but this is what your family signed up for when you agreed to be a Supreme Court justice. You knew you'd have to make controversial decisions, and that will upset many people. But to respond to your neighbors bothering you by displaying an upside-down American flag is just outrageous. Where is your patriotism? Can you not just ignore these people until things die down? These excuses just sound pathetic. I am confident that a reasonable person who is not motivated by political or ideological considerations or a desire to affect the outcome of Supreme Court cases would conclude that the events recounted above do not meet the applicable standard for recusal. I am therefore required to reject your request. The second incident concerns a flag bearing the legend "An Appeal to Heaven" that flew in the backyard of our vacation home in the summer of 2023. I recall that my wife did fly that flag for some period of time, but I do not remember how long it flew. And what is most relevant here, I had no involvement in the decision to fly that flag. My wife is fond of flying flags. I am not. My wife was solely responsible for having flagpoles put up at our residence and our vacation home and has flown a wide variety of flags over the years. In addition to the American flag, she has flown other patriotic flags, including a favorite flag thanking veterans, college flags, flags supporting sports teams, state and local flags, flags of nations from which the ancestors of family members came, flags of places we have visited, seasonal flags, and religious flags. I was not familiar with the Appeal to Heaven flag when my wife flew it. She may have mentioned that it dates back to the American Revolution, and I assumed she was flying it to express a religious and patriotic message. I was not aware of any connection between this historic flag and the Stop the Steal movement, and neither was my wife. She did not fly it to associate herself with that or any other group, and the use of an old historic flag by a new group does not necessarily drain that flag of all other meanings. Wow, so now he's going to lecture us about his wife's affinity for flying flags and claim that these flags associated with the January 6th movement are no different than flying the flag of your favorite sports team. Incredible. And on top of that, he's now claiming his wife had no idea the Appeal to Heaven flag had anything to do with the Stop the Steal movement. Interesting. That line seems like it could come back to haunt him. I also love how he says his wife flew the American flag as a symbol of patriotism, but he left out that it was flown upside down. I'd suggest that Justice Alito tell his wife to find a new hobby besides flying flags, but according to him, she doesn't listen to him, so why bother? As I said in reference to the other flag event, my wife is an independently minded private citizen. She makes her own decisions, and I honor her right to do so. Our vacation home was purchased with money she inherited from her parents and is titled in her name. It is a place away from Washington where she should be able to relax. I don't even know, man. What? And then listen to how he ends this letter. It is such a slap in the face. This guy is a piece of work. A reasonable person who is not motivated by political or ideological considerations or a desire to affect the outcome of Supreme Court cases would conclude that this event does not meet the applicable standard for recusal. I am therefore duty-bound to reject your recusal request. Sincerely yours, Samuel Alito. Well, there you have it. Justice Alito telling all of America to kick rocks because he's not recusing himself from these cases. I can't say I'm surprised by this turn of events, but the letter he wrote seems gratuitous and the facts detailed in it are beyond belief. These conservative Supreme Court justices are ensuring that Americans continue to lose faith in their institution. Chief Justice John Roberts better start cleaning up this mess, or the American people are going to do something about it.